The View menu allows for control and visibility of various parts of the UDK interface. Starting here at the top, we have the browser windows, and you'll see a submenu with all the different browser windows you can open up. Though really, you could grab any one of them, and you're going to get a window that has tabs for all the others as well. So if you just grab the content browser, you can quickly jump over to the log or the start page, which are also included in that submenu. Now moving down from here, we have the Actor Properties window. You'll be using this a lot as you set up the objects in your scene, so I'm actually here inside the VCTF Sandstorm level. I'm just going to select this static mesh. We'll go under View, come down to Actor Properties, and there you go. So there's the properties of this static mesh actor. Though admittedly, I never come up to the menu to open up this particular window. You can just double-click on any object, and that will open up its properties. Or if you don't like double-clicking, you can press F4 as well, and that will open up its properties. Now, moving down from here, we have the Surface Properties window. Now, to really show off surface properties, I need to get over here to a BSP surface. So let's come over here to this little platform. And if we select this, this is an object that was created via BSP. I'm going to jump out of game mode so that we can see that it is selected. And if I open up the Surface Properties window by going under View, Surface Properties, we have a huge number of options here that will control how this surface looks. We can control the positioning of its texture, we can control its light map resolution. Just as a quick example, I'll pan its texture. So notice I'm clicking the 4 in the U direction, and that's moving the texture 4 units along its U direction. I can also move it in V if I want, just as a quick example. So this is just a way to control those BSP surfaces. Now moving down, we have the World Properties window. This has got a lot of things that control your level in general, just all-around properties that are applied to your entire world. You can control various settings in light mass in here, as well as the zone info, which in this case shows the kill Z. This means that if your player drops below this altitude, they will die. So if you have a part of your level that's like a cliff that your player needs to fall off of, and when they fall, you need them to die, you can do that just by setting the kill Z to the altitude at which they need to die. Now, continuing down the menu, we have the ability to open up the Kismet and Matinee windows. So I'll just go ahead and open these up real quick. Here's the Kismet window with some Kismet sequences, in this case powering a camera fly-through through Matinee. If you go down to Matinee, this will give you a submenu containing all of the different Matinee sequences applied to your level, provided there are any. Now, Kismet and Matinee in and of themselves are something we're going to save for future lessons, but just as a case in point, I could open up this first sequence, which is for that camera fly-through, and if we move the view kind of down a little bit, I can hit play, and you can see that down here inside our perspective, we've got a little camera fly-through preview taking place. But for now, we'll go ahead and stop that and close out of Matinee. Now, continuing down the view menu, we have our drag grid, rotation grid, and scale grid settings. These control snapping. In short, the drag grid controls motion snapping, rotation grid is rotation snapping, and scale grid is, of course, scale snapping. And these all work the same way. You can enable or disable them at the very top, and then you have the increment of snapping that you'd like. So in the case of the drag grid, if you set this to 16, as you move objects around in your scene, they're going to snap to 16 unit increments. Very, very straightforward. For rotation, you can snap to increments of around 6 degrees. There's a little bit of play in there, as well as 45 and 90 degrees as well. And scale is going to snap to percentage. So do you want to scale up by snaps of 5%, and then it'll jump to 10%, then 15%, and so on and so forth. Now, as we continue down, we have the ability to set our auto-save interval. This is how often UDK is going to save your level while you work. Now, you'll notice there's no option in here to turn auto-save on and off. Actually, to do that, you need to come down to the lower right-hand corner of your interface in the console bar. Way in the far right corner, there's a little checkbox to turn auto-save on and off if you need to do that. Now, I generally leave that off for recording so that we don't get interrupted by a save window, but it's probably a good idea to leave that on just so you never lose any work. Now, moving down from here, we have detail mode. This allows us to have certain objects that are designated as high detail, and we can switch these on and off if we need to kind of speed up feedback in our viewport. So if I switch to low detail, you'll notice those mountains in the background kind of disappear, and then we can put these back up to high, and boom, there they are again. Now, continuing, we have several different options, most of which can be found inside the main toolbar. Now, what I'm going to do is give you kind of a brief rundown of each one of these. And a lot of these are fairly specific, so if you don't fully understand their nature after the description, It's just because at this point you haven't worked with that part of UDK yet. The more you work with UDK, the more this is all going to make a whole lot more sense. But I will give you a brief rundown on what these do. Allow translucent selection is for certain instances where you're using, say, static meshes that have a translucent material. Just as a case in point, perhaps you have a static mesh that's cone-shaped and has a material that makes it look like a volumetric light. You know when you shine a spotlight up into the air, how you can see that kind of cone of light reaching up into the sky? You could create a static mesh that mimics that. However, if you tried to select anything through that, the question is, do you want to select what's beyond that cone of light, kind of maybe a wall that's in the distance, or do you want to select the cone of light itself? If you want to select the actual cone that's forming that, you need to switch on Allow Translucent Selection. You have the ability to draw the red builder brush. If it's getting in your way, maybe you have a small level and you just need to make the thing disappear, you can switch this on and off. Moving down, we have Lock Prefabs from Selection. A prefab is a group of objects that you have designated that you decide need to go together. A really good example would be perhaps a static mesh of a lamppost that's got a little light attached to the end of it, and maybe a newspaper box that's always going to be right next to that lamppost wherever you place it in a level. You could define all of those objects as a single prefab and move them around as one object. And really, the lock prefabs from selection just determines whether or not you want to be able to select those as a single prefab or as the individual components that make it up. Next, we have use curves for distributions. This is fairly particular to working with particle systems. There are certain values in particle systems, and let's pick on an example. Let's say you've got a smoke particle system, where you got this smoke that goes up into the air, and as it goes up, it's also increasing in size. So you got some motion, and you've got a size increase over time. Now, inside, kind of under the hood of UDK, that is graphed out as a curve. That curve is plotting how large the particle is getting over its lifespan. However, calculating values as they change across a curve is fairly expensive. And so to save on the processing power of having to do that, UDK will bake everything out into what is called lookup tables. It's just kind of an internal chart where it says, all right, at 1 second into your life, you need to be this big. At 2 seconds, you need to be this big, and so on and so forth. However, this simplification can lead to it could potentially lead to problems if you're not getting the results you want. Perhaps you need it to be smoother to really see what's going on. And if that's the case, you can switch on use curves for distributions to kind of help you debug such problems. Next, we have enable socket snapping. I think the place where I use this the most is when I'm trying to put objects into characters' hands or attach an object to a character so they can hold it. A skeletal mesh, which would be what a general character is going to be made of if you're putting one into a level to animate, has got sockets on it. Now, a socket is really just a designated position where another object could